Many people talk about inequality and they measure it, but they don't explain it. And the reason for inequality is debt. More people are more and more deeply in debt, and more corporations are in debt. Corporations are in debt because corporate raiders or investors can borrow money at a very low interest rate, and they can buy companies that are paying a dividend rate of, say, 8 or 9 or 10%. So if you can borrow at 4%, you can buy a whole company that pays 10%, and you can make the difference is a kind of arbitrage. So companies that are financialized, that are taken over, companies whose managers are paid in stock options for raising the price, say, well, we're now going to use our earnings. We're not going to invest in new factories and new plant and equipment because that takes a long time to produce earnings and the market isn't there anyway. We're going to use our profits to buy back our stock. As a manager, I'm paid by how much I increase the company's stock for the stockholders. So basically, the banks gain by making more and more takeover loan interest, and stockholders gain to buy a stock that's going up in price, not because a company's producing more, not because it's earning more, but simply because it's buying up its own stock. Well, meanwhile, people are going more and more in debt. It's hard, I think, for Germans to realize how deeply in debt Americans are for their housing. Right now, the U.S. government guarantees mortgage loans made that absorb up to 43% of the borrower's income. Now imagine paying 43% of your income. Imagine if the Germans had to pay that high a proportion for rent. They wouldn't have money to spend on goods and services. It would squeeze the market. Well, over and above the 43% that families pay for income, all this is guaranteed by the government. If they go wrong, the banks don't lose. They have to pay student loans. In America, people may spend 10%, even more on student loans, so that's a big chunk of their income. The wages in America, before you get the wages, 15% and more is taken out for Social Security and health care. And then other bank loans have to be paid, credit card interest, auto loans, and taxes, maybe 10 or 15% above that. Income taxes, local taxes, and excise taxes. So the average paycheck in America that a family actually can spend on consumer goods, on goods and services, on food and clothing and transport is only about 20% of their income. And it's shrinking because they have to break even by borrowing more and more of their credit card debt. More and more interest and amortization has to be paid to the banks. And if markets are shrinking, why would companies invest more in plant and equipment? So investment is falling, consumption is falling, and the banks say, well, we're going to be in trouble because people can't afford to buy houses, they can't afford to repay their loans. So the Federal Reserve is doing what the European Central Bank does. It says, well, we'll lend you credit at 0%, and you can simply keep lending money to try to push up housing prices all the more. Now, in America, people think that when housing prices go up, the economy gets richer. But what it really does is it gets more and more in debt. When people borrow more to buy a house, they can afford to outbid other rival buyers and raise the house price. But what that means, every time housing prices go up, people have to pay more and more of their income for it and have less and less to spend in the economy. That's what makes Germany so competitive. You have low rents here. Until now, you've had low housing prices, so you have a competitive advantage over the United States. The United States Treasury talks to the European Central Bank and says, you must make Europe more uncompetitive. We don't want Europe as a competition. We want you to flood the economy with credit. We want you to make European labor as expensive as American labor so that you will not be in competition with American firms and producers. And we also don't want you to invest in Ukraine, Russia. Leave that to us. We will invest in Ukraine and Russia. You must impose sanctions on it. we're the unique economy, the indispensable economy, so we don't have to obey our sanctions, but you have to obey our sanctions. So essentially, Europe is following a policy that is made in Washington that, and New York and Wall Street that is making the economy less competitive. And at the end of this whole road, lies Greece. If you want to see why Europe is becoming more and more uncompetitive, look at what is happening in Greece or even in Latvia or other countries that are looked at as the ideal when you let the financial planners take over. This is the kind of economy that they plan. It's an economy to make the financial sector richer and the real estate sector richer, but it's not going to make the industrial economy richer. So I think in Germany, the question is, do you want to be an industrial economy or do you want to be a finance and real estate economy? You have a choice. And this choice is not being spelled out. And if people knew that that's the choice, I think they'd be following policies that help Germany much more than that helped American bankers.